Okay, thank you very much for coming to the afternoon session. I hope you enjoyed the lunch and then a lot of chat during that time. So we move on to the panels, this part 2. And I'm going to introduce Tanya Harrod. I don't need a lot of introduction for Tanya. Tanya is an eminent craft historian and has authored many books, including seminal work, The Crafts in Britain in 20th Century, which is a textbook now for us to study studio craft history in Britain. And The Last Sane Man, Michael Cardew, Modern Pots, Colonialism and Counterculture is another really very informative book. The Journal of Modern Craft, which she co-founded and edited with Glenn Adamson and Edward Cook, has been providing a platform for non-Eurocentric global debate on crafts. Tanya has also been leading critical investigation into women artists, with the choice of crafts as a third space. And therefore, I'm really grateful she has agreed to facilitate this panel with this eminent emerging Japanese woman artists. So I'll pass on to you, Tanya.
Great. Well, it's really good to be here with this very distinguished panel of Japanese artists. And we're here primarily to talk about their work, but we're also here to discuss the position of women in the Japanese craft scene, as well as considering the status of crafts in North America and Europe. So it's a case of compare and contrast. The very high status accorded craft in Japan is now realized, as you all know, through the system of living national treasures, as it's popularly described. The system was instituted after the Second World War in 1950 as the law for the protection of cultural properties, and was further developed in 1955 as the Committee for the Protection of Cultural Properties, designating individuals and groups as important intangible cultural properties. Now, there may be many criticisms of this system, but on the plus side, it was a groundbreaking piece of legislation predating UNESCO's intangible heritage designations honoring tacit knowledge. And tacit knowledge is knowledge of a kind that we all now realize deserves attention. It requires transmission from person to person. It often eludes any kind of notation, though that's not always the case. These kinds of skills need recording and preserving on a global basis, rather like the medicinal plants being lost in the Amazonian rainforests because of mining, logging, and agriculture. The remarkable skills embedded in craft should ideally survive both for themselves, but also because of applications that we may not at the moment imagine. The categories within craft media, within the Japanese intangible cultural property system, are ceramics, textiles, lacquer, metal, wood and bamboo, including basketry, dolls, and then a category of other crafts that include applied cut metal foil, cut glass, pâte de verre, paper making, cut stone, inkstones, and enameling. Intangible cultural properties are, of course, not only restricted to craft practice in Japan, they also include the theatrical arts, taking in no, kabuki, and bunraki, as well as music in many forms. With its high status and complex systems of recognition, craft in Japan can seem the very opposite of craft, for example, in the United Kingdom. Here, craft, since the Second World War, has had a very uncertain status, but it's also proved to be a place of intense creativity, especially for women, in an environment where the fine arts, painting, sculpture, and multiple other activities were, during the 1950s and 60s at least, extremely male-orientated. Undoubtedly, matters have improved as regards gender and race in the UK in recent years, although there are still injustices and inequalities. But in those immediate post-war years, and above all in art schools, where all kinds of masculinities were being played out, things were difficult for women fine artists. Hence the remarkable achievements of women in Britain in the field of craft, above all in ceramics, textiles, and jewellery. But the high status of craft in its more traditional manifestations in Japan has arguably worked against women and has gone hand in hand with a situation of male dominance, as the figures shown by Yuka Kikuchi of those awarded living national treasure status revealed this morning. I hope we'll discuss these complexities from several angles, taking gender and perhaps class as factors that have shaped the lives of our four very successful panelists, all women, one working in glass, one in lacquer or rushi, and two in ceramic. Another factor is, of course, geographies, as all these artists have links to the city of Kanazawa in Ishikawa Prefecture in Alpine Chibu. Kanazawa is an ancient castle town, the home of the Maida, the richest rulers of the Edo period. But now, paradoxically, it's a place where traditional and radical craft exist side by side. Ishikawa is one of the three prefectures in this area in northwestern Honshu, the main island of Japan, which since 2020 has hosted the Go for KOGEI program of exhibitions and events, all very imaginatively put together. These cross over fascinatingly between craft, KOGEI, and Bijitsu, fine art, these artificial distinctions that were set up in the Meiji period of modernization to fall in line with the very unhelpful distinctions we've lived with in the West for so long. But if we talk about regionalism in the context of Kanazawa, we must also reflect on globalization. For one of our artists now works in the UK, Hitomi Hosono, and another, Suzanne Ross, has come from the UK to make Japan her home. All the artists on this panel have spent significant time outside Japan, and all our artists have experienced some sort of homesickness. In fact, I prefer the phrase Heimweh. I'm half Swiss, and there's a special sort of homesickness called Schweizer Heimweh, which links to the fact that in an alpine area, living at lower levels induces a feeling of unease. So they've experienced Heimweh and a sort of nostalgia, which is another powerful, unsettling emotion, and a form of geographic dissonance. But these feelings have, I think, often proved highly productive. Each of our panelists will give a 10-minute presentation, after which I will throw a few questions at them and then open the discussion to the floor briefly. And then we'll have a more general discussion, which I hope will involve our audience. So to start off with, I'd like to introduce Rui Sasaki, a glass artist, or at least an artist working mainly in glass, who is currently working in Kanazawa. She graduated from Rhode Island School of Design in 2010 with an MFA, having already gained a BA at Musashino Art University in Western Tokyo in 2006. She's taught glass and contemporary art at Rhode Island School of Design, Worcester State University, and Pilchuck Glass School. She's also taught at Kyoto University of Art and Design and at the Seto Glass and Ceramic Center in Seto City. She's worked as a member of the Toyama City Institute of Art and Design in the Chibu region. She's been a participant in many residencies and has been awarded many prizes and grants around the world. For the 2021-22 Go for KOGEI exhibitions, Rui showed remarkable phosphorescent glass blown into snow cavities. These haunting objects were displayed in the Buddhist Natadera temple, a building of the 8th century, set in woodlands and mountains near Komatsu, a place of great natural beauty. So I'll hand over to
Thank you so much, Tanya, to introduce. And thank you so much for giving me such a great opportunity, Ms. Kikuchi and Mr. Akimoto. I'd like to talk about my work first as a concept because I see the material as a concept a lot and pursue the technique as well. As Tanya introduced, I live in Kanazawa right now, but I lived in Toyama for a few years. Toyama is like famous for glass, like we call Mecca of glass art in Japan. And then I use glass as a vehicle of preservation and recording as a residues from my surroundings, because glass never be back to Earth like more than like 2 million years. And also we're still using medicine bottle with glass because there is nothing chemical reaction happen with glass in the inside of material. So I use glass with preservation and then also the recording with exploring subtle intimacy from my surroundings. Subtle intimacy is very important to me because I studied abroad in the United States and I stayed there like more than 4 years. And after I came back to Japan, I had really severe reverse culture shock, which is I'm Japanese, but I back to Japan and comfortable but non-comfortable. So what is about? So I have like 3 questions about intimacy. Upon what is my intimacy built? Is it my physical form in Japan? If the space is immaterial, then what are the elements that are important for me to feel intimacy? So that is the 3 questions I always have in my mind. And this word is very important to me. Anything essential is invisible to the eyes. So always this word is in my mind when I'm making my work. And then also I believe that glass makes invisible element visible. And these 3 books is very important for myself when I'm researching. So this is a 3 Bible, my work, when I'm making my artwork. So this is a kind of behind the scene or behind a work, what I'm always interested in, what I'm thinking about. And then since I have reverse culture shock problem still, I always want to think about how I can make my 5 senses back to when I used to live in Japan. So I kind of start collecting plants as a self-medication. Plants absorb all airs, humidities, and rain and mineral from the dirt surroundings. And when I'm collecting plants, I have to use 5 senses. When you pick up the plants, you can touch and smell and everything. So without thinking about making artwork, I collect plants almost every day. And then here is my work called Subtle Intimacy 2012 to 2023. So this is an archive of the place I visited for 10 years. So wherever I go, I collected plants, taking snapshots and then bringing back to my studio. And then I place the plants between sheet glass and fire. So what you can see as a white stuff right now is white ash. And you can see kind of hole or bubble. So that came from the plants because the plants absorb all airs, humidities and everything. So once it fires, it become as a bubble to see. So viewer can go inside. And also, that is also I really like about glass. When you are behind the glass, some kind of image is very ambiguous. But when you are between the glass, the images of a human being is very vivid. So that is kind of relationship between ambiguity and the clear in my memories. So I would like to kind of make the viewer's experience of it. So I make that kind of installation. So this is another shot. It's another shot as well. So during the pandemic, that is really interesting things happen. when I collected the plants and then make this work like as usual, everything's explode like light-sided images. Everything's never turned to the ash. Everything just stayed as a charcoal. So I just wondering what's happening because human beings less interact with nature. So maybe the nature is really happy. I don't know. So maybe that's why they have a lot of energy. That's why they have big bubble and explode. I don't know. But again, like glass makes invisible things or issues visible through my artwork. And then that's kind of my observation of my surroundings. And this is another shot as well. And then this is a little like documentation that I had an exhibition at the 21st Century Museum of Contemporary Art in Kanazawa. And I cannot show everything because of time-wise, but you can kind of see like installation view. So people can approach in the dark room and then to see what's happening. So actually, like, I'm like using plants. So I have a lot of artist residency program because I can't like import the plants from other countries. So I always have a new experience to explore a new place where I am and then how I can react to places through my artwork. And then, of course, that is in organic material, so stays in the glass. So if the glass is never broken, it will be stay like more than 2 million years. So it's kind of time capsules. And then how I make work is very simple. So I collected plants and place the plants between sheet glass and the fire. And again, like, I'm using plants, so I go abroad on a different studio to make artwork a lot. So this is a wonderful studio called Bullseye Glass, located in Portland, Oregon, in the United States. I stayed there almost like 3 months to make this work. And then also in the Hokuriku region, including Toyama and Kanazawa, like there is such an unstable weather. It's always raining and always cloudy. And then I was really impressed about how weather is unstable because I grew up southern part of Japan and also Tokyo, suburb of Tokyo. And I wonder about how I can visualize sunshine or how I can record sunshine all the time. And then I found phosphorescent crystal mixture, which is absorb the UV lights and emit in dark. And then this glass is used for the kind of industrial reason to make that kind of road. And I make this work, reminiscence of the water, in the KOGEI 2021, created by Mr. Akimoto. And this is like made by snow mold, which is blowing to the snow. And then also the snow has also like have a character of the surroundings. Like, Kanazawa snow is very wet and some parts of area snow is very dry. And then so I would like to imprint the snow condition onto the glass. So this is how we blow the glass. So one of them is Sweden, which is very dry snow, and one of them is Kanazawa. I blow in the snow. It's very wet, so the shape is different. And then we call snow, snow color is blue in Kanazawa because it's very wet. So once sunshine goes through the wet snow, it becomes more bluish color. So we don't call it snow is white. So that's very interesting to me. So this is a little document for my artwork that I showed at the Goho KOGEI. So I showed this work in temple, and once you go through, there is a Japanese garden, and the water is very important because all melted snow is going to this garden to show the water. And once you go through the Japanese garden, there is a green tea house, and then the artwork is showing in the inside of a green tea house. And this is phosphorescent glass, so when the viewer is inside, it turns off, and then glass is glowing dark. But when people are not there, light is on and charged. So this is depending on how much people often come here, and then how long the previous people stay there. So this work is never be the same situation. And then previous work is pretty much controlled, but I really wanted to use the sunshine more. So this is called weather chandelier, and then showed in the bird watching house in the public park, and then connected to the solar panel, and then connected to this work. So once the solar panel charged, this work is lighted on and charged, and then glow in dark. But again, we have such a bad weather, unstable weather. So when the rainy days, in 3 days in row, this work is never glowing dark. So once people is coming, people don't know what's going on. My work is broken, but that is intention for me. So thank you so much.
Well, it's so interesting. In fact, my first question seems rather boring by contrast with what you've been talking about. I think it's true that hot glass production is a relatively new genre of art in Japan. And do you feel that conferred sort of special freedoms?
That's a really interesting question, because since we have a long history of ceramics, and also glass has a long history, but in Japan, we just only have a 35 education. So glass is kind of new craft department in the art university. And then we used to have a teacher who used to work at the factory. So just only more craftsmanship is going on. But including me, a lot of my generation artists going study abroad and bringing back to how we can kind of thinking about glass as a concept and expression. So it's we are kind of between craft, but also contemporary art, I think, in Japan. So that's very interesting to me. More than maybe ceramics and lacquer has a long history and more strong craft and KOGEI kind of influence, but the glass is very new, so we have more freedom, I can say. Yeah.
I think you suggested that in your career, gender wasn't a particular problem, but that a feeling of difference or race, perhaps, was struck you when you went to the States, a feeling of otherness. And you said that at times you felt like a ghost in the USA, and you asked your mother to send you dust from Japan. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, especially gender, if you especially blowing glass, we have to blow heavy stuff or something. So if we thinking about too much about gender, we can't make any work. So sometimes I have to just ask the big man to help me to blow big glass. And also we always have to work with somebody. So we just can't really too much take personally about how do you say that gender. But the race is definitely because when I studied abroad, mainly a lot of people are white people. So when I go there, I studied abroad, there is not a lot of Asian there, and also African American people is not really working. So I cannot say that there is a bias happening, but it's more white people oriented society.
Yeah. So you might have felt, I don't know, otherness or just homesickness, perhaps.
Yeah, homesickness, but also I'm there, but I'm not really there. That kind of a feeling happens. So that's why I kind of felt the ghost a lot. But also at the same time, that's also gives me a new inspiration, how I can think about where I am, or how I can feel about intimacy. And then I can that is a kind of moment how I can use the material as a glass into my concept. So that was kind of a good experience to me being an artist.
Once you got back, you spoke of feeling this reverse shock in a form of a sort of loss of intimacy with your home country. And you spoke to me very movingly about intimacy in space and in particular, your admiration for Gaston Bachelard's book, The Poetics of Space, which is really about the phenomenology of space, a sort of emotional response to odd spaces like attics or cellars or even chests of drawers. Can you talk a bit more about that sort of feeling of spatial importance or unease?
Yeah. Since like a space is always surrounding me, like so I always try to perceive how I can kind of describe the space. So like when I'm kind of like, explore certain intimacy, always like I have to kind of observe my space, and then but not looking at space, but how I can like touch the space or smell the space, how I can use my five senses is very important to me. And then when I read like the Poetic of Space or In Praise of Shadow, the book is really question to me how I can kind of like see the space not with eyes, with five senses. So that's why the three books I introduced was really important to me towards my work.
Actually, I was thinking of Glenn's talking about sci-fi and the future, because in some ways, the way you capture plants in glass, it's like you're making a kind of herbarium for a future world where there may, I don't know, be no plants. It's a kind of futuristic project somehow.
Yeah, some scientists like told me like I'm a kind of mad scientist to like like conserve a record like a future like some X-ray or I don't know like, but like actually like preserving is very important to me. I really need some material, not like taking photo or something. Like material is very important for me to see.
Do you ever worry about how you're categorized? Because I was looking at the Corning Museum website where they describe you as a conceptual artist. So do you feel a sort of KOGEI person, or does it matter? Perhaps it isn't important.
That is a kind of big question to me. Since I went back to Japan, I'm struggling a lot where I'm kind of located, because when I back to Japan, like people say I'm no KOGEI artist because I'm very more conceptual artist, but also I'm using technique, I'm making my work. So it's different from contemporary art, who is just using material for their medium, not to make their work. But for me, the process is very important to know about the material. And because if I'm not making like my work by myself with glass, I never can have any concept behind the material. So that's a huge difference, but there is no category like thinking about material as a concept in Japan, because when people thinking about KOGEI, it's more about technique and more about material. So who I am and how I can categorize myself is I don't know. That's I think the curator should tell me, or no, maybe I don't know.
I guess we can have a few questions. I'm conscious of time, but if there are any questions in the audience, that would be great. But perhaps we'll save them to the end. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Rui. So it's a great pleasure now to introduce Suzanne Ross. She first encountered Japanese lacquer or urushi at the Great Japan exhibition in London in 1981. And shortly afterwards, in 1984, she came to Japan with ambitions to master this ancient craft in a few months, and ended up spending over 30 years devoted to a fuller understanding of its possibilities. In 1990, she entered the Waijima Institute of Lacquer Arts on a Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation scholarship, and she learned to make items from start to finish, ignoring the division of labor that is often associated with lacquer work. She studied with master craftsmen for 9 years. She then studied with the national living treasure Kuni Komori for a further year. In 2016, she was awarded a 3-year business grant to develop and promote her work. She's taken part in many Japanese competitive exhibitions, such as the Asahi Modern Craft Exhibition. And she's had a solo show at the Craft Museum in Kanazawa. Her book, fascinated by Yorushi was published in Japanese in 2019. And she's a remarkable ambassador, I don't think we say ambassadress anymore, for the craft, giving lectures at all levels from university students right down to primary school children, as well as making numerous television appearances and lecturing on Yorushi all over the world. She's been the subject of a TV documentary, and sadly in the Noto earthquake of January the 1st, 2024, she lost both her Wajima home and studio, and she has now relocated to a hot spring area within Kanazawa City. So, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I am originally a Londoner, and the V&A was my childhood playground, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be back here. I've lived in Japan for 41 years. I never expected to. I expected to be there just for 3 months. Before I get started, I just want to make sure that everybody knows what lacquerware is. Unlike glass and ceramics, urushi, which is the material that lacquerware is made from, is a natural tree sap. It's been used for 9,200 years in Japan for lacquering. We tap the trees and we use this raw tree sap, this very delicious looking stuff, to make lacquerware. My art has evolved in a very different way from most artists. In Japan, I found that there's a philosophy, a lifestyle left over from the samurai way of life. And it's through this discipline of life that is followed through tea ceremony, flower arranging, calligraphy, and archery, and in Zen Buddhism even, in the way they eat, bathe, and even go to the toilet. This philosophy of life was fascinating for me. So more than being a craftsman who relies on repeating the same thing over and over again as efficiently as possible, or as an artist who is interested in concept and self-expression, the way of lacquering in itself is the art, and your life is your art. So for me, the very process of doing lacquerware was the basis of my artwork. It took me 5 years to find anyone who was willing to teach me. I went several times to Wajima and was rejected every year on the basis of being a woman. Women did not do lacquerware. They were good enough for sanding and for polishing because of their soft skin. I was told that there were over 100 stages and that each stage would take 3 years to master. So I decided then that I was going to live to 326. After winning a scholarship from the Daiwa Foundation, I was accepted into the local college, which trains future living national treasures. It has achieved this, its goal by producing the most recent living national treasures. I was the first foreigner to complete a course, and actually the longest student in school. Wajima Nuri, which is the area, the lacquerware area that I'm from, is produced by division of labor. And so I needed to graduate several times in order to do every technique so I could come back to London, which I never actually quite managed. In the first year, we learnt different techniques. This is the inlaying technique of makie, carving technique of chinkin, and the lacquering technique. We were taught to design, lacquer, every shape possible. And this was my graduation work. But even then, I was determined to fit in with English culture. And amongst much opposition, this is a small chest of drawers made as a jewellery box and a tea caddy. I was constantly pushing the boundaries of what urushi could do, because for me it wasn't something that I had grown up with, although I had used the V&A and the British Museum as a playground and seen lots of lacquerware. There was so much versatility to the material that I felt hadn't been explored. I tried different materials, and at the time this was very unique, that I tried carbon fiber and was accused of being an industrial spy. As I said before, my art was my lifestyle, and so my husband and I moved to this derelict house where we got water from a waterfall, no electricity, no telephone, no communication, no internet or television, and we completely renovated it and lived a very Edo period lifestyle for many years. I also raised my 2 children here. When my children grew bigger, I had to move my studio out into the cattle shed. So I renovated the cattle shed, which was a remarkable building, very much respected in the UK, but not in Japan. People couldn't understand why I would want to live there. Later on, I opened my own gallery and a center where I could explain about lacquer and crafts to the general public. Having learned various techniques, I was able to mix and match as I felt, really trying to push the boundaries of urushi as far as I possibly could. In Japan, a woman's bowl is smaller than a man's bowl, which I didn't like because I have a large appetite. So I decided to differentiate the woman's bowl by using lace from Paris. I then wondered if I could make an object just out of lace, so I made this incense box. I further wanted to push the barriers and see if I could actually inlay the lace into a dish. I was also interested in silver, not as part of a picture, but as a colour, because I was very envious of British silversmiths. I also wanted to see how diversified I could make lacquerware, so the same bowl but totally different expressions. Again, silver pushed to its limits. The same wooden dish but totally different expressions. Again, the same tea ceremony dish but totally different ways of using urushi. Customers were very surprised that it was urushi because they're so used to seeing the same things produced over and over again that the Japanese have really turned their back on their own culture and on lacquerware. This is also tea ceremony caddies, tea caddies for tea ceremony. I was painfully aware that after the Japanese bubble burst, fewer and fewer visitors came to our town, and the economical climate in Wajima was getting very hard. More craftsmen were going out of business daily and shops were closing down. So I tried to find new ways of using urushi, and one of them was jewellery. I used opal, coral, lapis, amber, pearls. I tried modern, just using urushi alone, paper and lace, a horn. But to my surprise, while I actually was aiming at the European market, but Japanese were buying jewelry while Europeans were buying rice bowls. Echizen, which is very close to Wajima and very famous for washi, traditional washi, it has a 400-year history. They invited me to help them with revitalizing their craft. And as a present, they gave me lots of paper. I didn't know what to do with that paper because it was very thick. So I decided to start urushi painting, and this was my first attempt. After that, I started to use the diatomaceous earth, which we use for the undercoats of lacquer bowls and inlays of shell. And again, making washi 3D and inserting pearls and gold leaf. This was during COVID, so as I produced more and more things, a gallery offered me my first abstract art exhibition, which took place in 2023. I then went on to make hats for the Urushi International exhibition, and these hats were in the Wajima Museum when a 7.6 earthquake hit our town. It completely devastated the Noto area. This is my house, or the remains of my house and my studio. My gallery was missed being burnt down by a couple of 100 meters. This was my gallery where I had to live for a couple of months. Autumn of last year, to process what I had been through, I had another exhibition of abstract art. I didn't have any tools or drying facilities, but I just made the best of what I had. This piece is called Noto, in homage to the Noto Peninsula and the terrible devastation there. And this one is called Intertwine, which reminds us of our humanity, that we're all linked together in this world. Thank you so much.
So interesting. I want to sort of revert to the question of women, or start with the question of women, and talk about the sort of missing years, because you arrived in Japan in '84 and finally were accepted on a course in 1990. So how did it sort of dawn on you that this was a very male-dominated area of craft?
It didn't dawn on me. I was smacked over the head with it. I was told that this was not for women. So go away.
Did you sort of try and teach yourself in those interim years?
I learned different techniques of sumie and calligraphy to try and learn about Japanese aesthetics, but it was very much, you're white, you're a woman, we don't want you.
So being a Westerner was as problematic as perhaps being a woman?
I would say even more. The Japanese really don't like teaching their traditional techniques to foreigners. They don't believe they can understand them. They don't believe they can do them.
And the other thing that fascinated me about the early part of your talk was that you kind of bought into a way of life, a sort of pre-Meiji, pre-modernization way of life. Was that because of some kind of hippie sort of aesthetic you brought with you from from London, as it were? Or was it actually a feeling that that's the only way you could make good work?
I was really fascinated by the samurai way of living, that living in the moment. With calligraphy, you only get one chance at things, and just being really alive. But also it was a reaction to the culture shock of being so cut out. So that was my little England. It was an island for me. When I crossed the bridge, I had a waterfall that I crossed to get to my house. So when I crossed that bridge, I was in England. I was at home.
I see. But you were also, in a way, inhabiting a romantic samurai. A little world, rather like the pre-Raphaelites, sort of turning their
picking
back.
wild mountain vegetables and living on waterfall water and just really enjoying the flowers and the animals and the skyscapes. Yes, I suppose it was very romantic until the earthquake.
Do you feel that lacquer is at all properly understood in the West, in fact, despite one or two practitioners like Eileen Gray?
I think it's probably more understood, actually. I have a Facebook group of about 800 foreign artists all over Europe who are very serious about it and actually can earn a living doing lacquerware. And so I set up this Facebook group because of the lack of information in English, of the lack of willingness on the Japanese craftsmen to share their knowledge. So I thought if they're not going to share their knowledge, then we'll share it with each other. And so I set up this group so that artists could help each other. And there are some open-minded Japanese people that also, some professors who donate their information and post. And that's been going on for well over 10, 15 years.
So do you feel among all the varied sort of craft activities that are recognized within the intangible cultural heritage world of Japan, do you feel lacquer is the most closed world in a way? I mean, because ceramics, of course, is so much a kind of global, so much global interest, but lacquer.
Yes, it's very closed. One, because the material alone, the materials and the tools are difficult to get hold of. The material are extremely expensive. And to make one piece will take at least a year. So to actually be able to have an exhibition, you need at least 50 pieces, which will take you several years to collect. And you have to live in the meantime. So the cost alone, without access to materials and to tools, because the tool makers are all dying out, it's very difficult to make it in the lacquer world and to find someone to teach you.
On a sort of ecological note, I think you said that you planted the trees from the genus, the Rus trees. Is that important for you, that you're generating the raw material?
I planted trees in my garden because Japanese are so ignorant of their own culture, and so I need to show them that there's an actual tree, and we get lacquer from this tree. But I also plant trees in Japan as a volunteer and have hassled my town to plant trees, because only 5% of Japanese raw lacquer is produced in Japan. 95% is produced in China. So all the national treasures, all the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Japan need to be repaired with Japanese lacquer, with Japanese urushi, because the Chinese stuff isn't strong enough. So if there aren't sufficient trees, then Japan cannot fulfill its promise to UNESCO to preserve these fantastic buildings for future generations.
You seem to be suggesting that perhaps Japan has slightly turned its back on lacquer. And yet, earlier we were told there was a sort of fantastic renaissance amongst younger women working in lacquer. So how does that sort of...
Japan has failed in its duty to preserve its culture, especially lacquer. Mm-hmm. And the people you're talking about is a mere handful, if that. So it's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, I was struck by this artist, Hitomi Hosono, and her red lip sculptures, and another artist called Ino Ishizo. These are both shown in Go for KOGEI, using dry lacquer. and these strange folkish sort of figures. So, but they're a tiny handful of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very few. And there's some wonderful work being done in KOGEI in Tokyo and all over the country by young Japanese artists, but they're a drop in the ocean. And the Japanese government is really failing in its duty.
It's failing in its duty through not funding courses or...
In planting trees.
Oh, in planting trees.
If you have no lacquer, then you have no industry. If you have no raw tree sap, then everything falls to pieces.
Right, so it is an ecological...
Yes, 9,200 years of history disappears.
Gosh, that's fascinating. Well, thanks so much. Decided to have our questions at the end, perhaps, time-wise. Yes. Thank you so much. It's exciting to present Yoca Muta, who, like all our speakers, has been on several actual and metaphorical journeys. She studied painting at Tokyo's Yokai University before coming to the UK to undertake a BA in fine art at Goldsmiths College at the University of London, graduating in 2008. And just the very conjunction of fine art and Goldsmiths will mean a lot to many people in this audience. Her work there was conceptually based, involving video, installation, and performance. She showed in the highly selective exhibition of recent graduates, New Contemporaries in London. She also showed a commissioned work in London at the Institute of International Visual Arts, entitled A Tale of Two Sons. She took the decision to return to Japan, which was not perhaps surprising, but more surprising was her decision to train in ceramics, and in particular to learn the Kutani Yaki style of colourful ceramic overglazed decoration, of which she is now a leading exponent. She studied at the Kutani Training Center in Ishikawa, graduating from this highly practical course in 2012. She largely hand builds her forms and draws on many inspirations from manga to gaming to the folkloric, in particular being inspired by the famous 1910 collection of folk tales, the Tono Monogatari. These stories, the Japanese equivalent of Grimm's fairy tales, but of course published much later, are often unsettling, eerie, fascinating and disturbing in their attitudes to women. But inspiration also flows from Yoca Muta's contact with nature after a distinctly urban Tokyo upbringing. So it'd be great to hear from you.
So, hi, I'm Yoca Muta. Thank you for being here and joining this program today. I'm very grateful to be here talking to you in person. Since I graduated Goldsmiths College, it's been 16 years, and I couldn't come back to UK in that time. So I'm kind of quietly overwhelming. and V&A was one of particularly memorable place. I always visit the place and I was watching those many objects with many fascinating objects, and I think this is one of the place that led me to the world of craft. So thank you so much. So these are some of my works from the past few years. Many of them are bezel shaped, but I also create sculptural pieces and installations, sometimes combine ceramics with textiles, such as cushions. But today I'd like to focus on the ceramic works, which is the core of my practice. I work with both porcelain and earthenware, but I started by learning porcelain, specifically kutaniware. Kutaniware is one of the traditional porcelain, the Japanese porcelain craft, and known for its vibrant and diverse overglazed painting styles. I studied these techniques at the Kutaniware Training Center, and I use those techniques as the foundation of my works today. I'd like to introduce my practice through some of my recent and past works. This is one of my recent works. This work was inspired by Kutani pot from the late 19th century. At the time, large pots with red decorative patterns were popular export items to Europe and America. It was a time of rapid westernization, and during that period, the concept of art was introduced to Japan. At the same time, the word KOGEI, which had essentially meant artisanal skill, gradually came to be used more broadly to describe craft, everything outside the domain of fine art. Around the time, craft and art began to separate in Japan. So works and products of this era are very interesting to see from the point of view. In this work, I borrowed the form and style of this oriental and decorative pot and transformed it into something more visceral and raw, an object that feels like an anomaly within the space. The body was hand-built, and using techniques such as coiling, and the wet-looking appearance of human skin and sea creatures were finished with Kutani's characteristic glassy overglaze painting. The title of the piece is Isome, or Sea Woman, in English. This name represents both the traditional female divers and the folkloric sea spirit, something akin to a mermaid. My current living place, Ishikawa Prefecture, is the center of Kutaniware and largely surrounded by sea. It's also a region where those divers still exist today. I wanted to capture a strong and wild image of women who gather their own food from the sea. So this work is deeply influenced by the environment and the culture that surround me. Here is another work related to the sea, or sea itself. The title of this piece is Uminari. The word means the simple sound of waves, but it can also refer to the deep rumbling sounds caused by movement of seafloor. For Japanese people, the sea is a deeply fundamental presence in everyday life. It's a vital source of life, shaping our food, art, culture, history, and politics. At the same time, the sea and its waves also linked to the trauma of tsunami and earthquake for most Japanese people over the age of 13. It's unpleasantness that brings both blessing and disaster. This tea ball has the same title, Uminari. The motifs of abundant fish are traditionally symbols of good fortune in Japan and many parts of the Chinese cultural sphere. The red pattern also conveys a sense of celebration. However, these entangled sea creatures might also suggest a sense of freeing or becoming an overwhelming tide themselves. I'd like to convey both the desire and fears that people project onto nature, even in the small vessel. My recurring interests are how people have used their imagination to interpret nature and how those perspectives and expression have shifted over time. Another motif I often use is a mythical creature, such as dragons and oriental lion. Classic motif in Asian porcelain. I see these creatures as stylized version of nature. For example, the dragon was once worshipped as a god of the sea and water in Japan. Many rivers in Japan have dragon in their names. Many legends say that an angry dragon could cause floods and heavy rain. I see it functioning as a translation that exists between nature and human imagination. But in Japan today, dragons are likely more familiar as nostalgic design motifs or fantasy characters in fiction, such as manga, animation, and games. Those pop culture has become very mainstream in Japan. I think those mythical creatures in fiction actually have a strong influence and in some ways shaping the modern Japanese perspective on nature. I think that kind of fictional or anime-like way of seeing nature probably shows up in how I depict dragons and mythical creatures too. Now, I'd like to briefly talk about the practical side, how I make my work, including the techniques, materials, and processes. My work usually starts with hand building. It brings a sense of directness and a sense of touch to the form, both primitive and personal. Also, the bump of unevenness from hand building brings subtle depth to the hand painting as well. I feel this is important because it creates a scene where the form and the surface are intertwined, not separate. Many of my works take the form of vessels. It also carries a sense of tactility and motion in their own shape. Vessels have a closer connection to the human body, whether they are small or large. For the painting process, I begin with underglaze, then apply glaze, and finally do several layers of overglaze painting. This approach comes from Kutani techniques, but over time I've developed my own style. Ceramic colors are limited, and their final tones after firing can be unpredictable, but I find that unpredictability really inspiring. It opens up creative possibilities. And finally, I'd like to return to one of my recent works, this piece which depicts an old woman entangled with plants and insects. The work is titled Yamauba, which means roughly to mountain hag, or old woman, mountain old woman. Yamauba is a mythical figure from old Japanese folktales, something like a mountain witch. She is often portrayed as a scary old woman who attacks travelers or fishermen. She eats everything, people, animals, even rivers. But if you go further back in history, she was occasionally regarded as a mountain goddess or guardian deity of child care. She sometimes helped villagers, especially young women who were in trouble. And of course, there were also actual people and communities who lived deep in the mountain, away from the village society. So Yamauba represents a kind of ambiguous figure exists between human and nature, monster and god, real and imaginary. This piece was inspired the life of the mountain, a book written about 100 years ago by the folklorist Kunio Yanagida. The book recorded oral traditions, superstitions, and customs from villages in the northern Japan. In it, I found many stories of women wandering the mountain, some kidnapped, some escaping, some lost in thought, and some simply living there. It really stirred my imagination, and I overlaid those various images of mountain women with the figures of a modern woman. Thinking about myself, people around me, friends, family, those I've met only once, and even those I never met. While reflecting on the connection between nature and women, I painted her in a way that celebrates both vitality and aging. Oops, sorry. Gome. Sorry. So this is one of my ongoing themes, and there's some other works with related subjects, some female figures inspired by Japanese old story and folk tales. I hope this has sparked some interest in you. Thank you for listening.
Lovely. Yoca, I'm particularly fascinated by your move from essentially conceptual work, or the sort of work you were doing at Goldsmiths and the atmosphere there, and a turn to such a labor-intensive, skill-based form of expression, albeit full of resonance for now. How did this extraordinary change come about?
To be honest, to me, transition from contemporary art to ceramic wasn't really big gap. I didn't really feel like that, because the one significant thing I learned from UK art education or Goldsmith education was that art can be in any form, and it can reside in any way. So to me, it was like a simple, because I was thinking about ceramic as a material, and I bumped into the small souvenir of Kutani ware. Then I thought there's many possibility in there. It could be, it looks really kind of humanity. I put humanity in the one of Kutani ware product. It was so vibrant and not really sophisticated. So you could kind of feel the touch of human hand. So I thought maybe I could develop more in that, in the Kutani ware. I could develop my art practice in the Kutani ware. That's what I thought. And
yeah, I suppose it teaches us that actually this word conceptual art is rather strange, because all art is conceptual to an extent.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
But I always associate Goldsmiths with learning a skill as and when you need it. But I suppose that's what you did.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think even you're working with video art or whatever, or photograph or performance, you need time-consuming work, and even when I was making video work, I was taking really long time to make props for the video, and it was dedicating work. So in that sense, I didn't really feel difference.
Some of your work's extremely large. Is that unusual in the sphere of Kutani?
I think so.
Where?
I think so too. I think because researcher said it is impossible to make large Kutani ware nowadays, especially if it's hand-built, because the thickness is not even. So it can be cracked or broken in a kiln easily. So, but I really wanted to make it bigger, so I examined some tests and kind of managed to make bigger one recently. And then presence, how we perceive presence is different by scale, of course. But I was quite surprised when I actually made a large size of pot with a human figure on it. It was overwhelming. and I noticed, like, why so many people like large pot, which I didn't know before.
Yes, I suppose we did talk a bit about Grayson Perry and the idea of a large form, and then you come up close. and you're surprised, even alarmed, terrified by what you see. I wanted to talk a bit about gender, because I remember you telling me that you were required to draw an unclothed woman in a life class at art school, and that made you uncomfortable. You sort of realized that historically this had been a male gaze really focused on women. And you've talked about the folk tales in this amazing collection, Latono Monogatari, which are wonderful stories that actually you've introduced me to, which was wonderful. And they seem to parallel tales about witches in Western culture and various ways in which women are sort of demonized or categorized. Can you say a bit more about that?
Well, about the university, a class of university, Japanese university, and I think it was more like disappointed rather than uncomfortable, because I was expecting the art college to be more free and and it was like a more liberation. but I had to start like really conventional theme as a female nude sketch or painting. So, and just before I have read the book about the gender, so it was like immediate reaction, I guess. And I kind of understand this like ambiguous frustration that I have been feeling during high school, like why I cannot wear pants or why only female student has a household class. that kind of things came across, and just that, I think, yeah. But I think I'm not really like active feminist, which is not really proud of. I'm not proud of it, but just saying that, just declare that, just mentioning that the political things is make bold person in Japan, because in Japan it's very quiet. You don't really talk about politics or feminists, but if you look at the fact, like Yuko in Yuko's presentation, Japanese gender gap is 118, so 146, and only 50% of women politicians in the parliament, and 20% gap between female and male income is 25%. So how can I say it's normal? Or and I don't really want to say my girl or my daughter or any other girl or boy that this is normal in Japan. There's no gap in and so it's like I don't really have a choice. Like I have to be somehow feminist, and it's same for me. Like just being feminist is like anti-sexist, just saying anti-sexist. And talking about Yamauba and Yamauna, the work, I think Yamauba and Yamauna is depicted as a scary figure in a folktale or child book, but actually, as I told in a presentation, it is ambiguous figure, and then in the Tono Monogatari, it's like just actual person, like somebody bumped into the lady in the mountain who survived. So if you survive in the mountain, your outfit and gesture maybe become really wide and strange and become something like animals and transforming like to nature. So maybe that makes Yamauna to be a scary impressions, but maybe it's just surviving. It's all about surviving. So I think for me, depicting Yamauna is like imagination and empathy connecting to my work, if it makes sense.
So, yeah, we did talk a little bit about the occult and the irrational, which I sort of saw as something that was quite widespread among artists all over the globe, like this return of interest in early 20th century artists like Mondrian and Kandinsky and Hilma af Klint in Theosophy and other forms of sort of spiritualism. And the recent show at the Warburg of tarot cards. And I just wonder whether you're part of this kind of global turn that explores irrationality and the unknown and the mythic.
Well, I like occult movies and sci-fi movies, but I don't really particularly see the connection between my works. But maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I need more study or look into their relation. But to me, like occult is I think background of occult is really strongly connected with Christianity. Somehow I feel like that. But in Asian background, Christianity isn't something different from our culture. So I think more like folktale, like looking at folktale or folk story is like not like something irrational or something occult to me. To me, it's like looking at roots of our culture, our current culture. Even it's modernized and westernized, there is some distortion and gap in everyday life. And I think just looking at folklore, you can sometimes find the roots of that. So it's like trying to understand what it makes a current constitution, like current society. Yeah.
But as well as dealing with these sort of mysterious other worlds, you're also working with quite an unforgiving material, porcelain, which sort of guarantees permanence. Is that important? Again, going back to the world of video. And
I think so. I think tactility is the most most important aspect of ceramic to me. Yeah, I was using resin and plaster when I was making props for video work or 3D sculpture work. But resin and plaster, even I love those materials, but it's quite fragile and it's transformed its shape to be, I don't know, sometimes the darkened color get darkened or like it became like a powdery or it will disappear in ages, in a time. But ceramic is a very strong material and you can even touch it and it can stay like 1,000 years. It's very fascinating material, and at the same time, using that materials changing my perspective, like a sense of time as well. So I can say 100 years is not so long. I feel like 100 years is coming soon, and 100 years ago is just before, just like not so much. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fascinating, yes. No, it's art for all time, in a sense, which can't be true of many installations with all the problems they present. Well, thanks so much. That's really...
Thank you.
Well, now we're going to hear from our last panelist, who's had to wait to the end, Hitomi Hosono, who was actually born in the pottery town of Tajimi, in Gifu Prefecture. And who, there's this link again to Kanazawa. You studied at the College of Art there. And then from 2005 to 2006, you were at the Danmarks Design School in Copenhagen, taking a ceramics design course. And finally, in 2007, you went to the Royal College of Art, taking an MA in the Department of Glass and Ceramics. And perhaps most important of all, I don't know, during 2017-18, you were an artist in residence at Wedgwood in Stoke-on-Trent. And while living in Kanazawa, as a student, you worked at all kinds of student jobs as a dishwasher, worked in a bar, and all these experiences supplied ideas for the kutani ware that you were then making. But this period at Wedgwood, after graduating from the Royal College, interested you in the technique of sprigging, and you evolved your unique present way of working, using hundreds of leaf forms, press-molded and carved in porcelain, applied to a vessel shape. You exhibit through Adrian Sassoon all over the world, have won numerous prizes and are included in numerous public collections around the world. And interestingly, for the 2019 manga exhibition at the British Museum, you created sort of three-dimensional manga in porcelain, using the overglazed decoration associated with kutani ware. So that was sort of looking back. But the British Museum also owns one of your most ambitious porcelain works, a bowl made up of 1,000 leaves. And you live in North London, so it'd be great to hear about distances travelled.
Thank you so much, and wonderful introduction, Tanya. And I'm really pleasure to be here. And first, I speak about the work I made in Kanazawa City in Ishikawa, Japan, like 2003, this piece. My intention with this work was integrate my manga drawings with ceramic art using kutani overglaze painting technique. The subject of this piece is inspired by the woman who I encountered in the nightlife entertainment district, Katamachi, in central Kanazawa. This is one of the several works I created around this theme. To support my living cost, I worked late in the evenings and nights at a small counter bar in area. I became fascinated by the woman who also worked those hours, running a small bars, washing dishes, serving fine restaurant in kimono, working in pachinko parlors, or entertaining male customers as hostesses. Their strength and grace inspired me to make this work. This is another piece which I used kutani overglaze painting, and it's from the 2003 to 2004. Hokuriku is truly a food lover's paradise, and leaving the region is something I still regret. While working at the fine Japanese restaurants by the Saigawa River, I was lucky to enjoy exquisite local foods each week. One of my favorites was amaebi, sweet shrimp, which became the theme of this piece. The deep, luminous color of the shrimp reminded me of the rich red used in Kutani overglaze painting. This sparked my imagination. I saw the shrimp as a female figure, pregnant and full of life, holding countless eggs. In blend of fantasy, food, and femininity gave birth of this work. And this is Koba Kogani, and made 2003. This piece was also inspired by a beloved local delicacy, Koba Kogani, the female snow crab enjoying the winter. Like the sweet shrimp, she carries many eggs, and I imagined what it would be like if she stepped out for a night in Kanazawa, wearing crab shell boots and heading into the city's entertainment district. I was enjoying working at night while living in Kanazawa. I painted this ceramic piece sitting on tatami mat under the glow of a single lighting workshop. At times, it felt as if the spirit from Mount Uratsuyama had crept into the room to guide me in my hand. Now, when I looked at these works and from this series, I feel that they've all absorbed the atmosphere and the mood of my nights in Kanazawa. After moving to the UK, I developed a new style of porcelain work and thought I would leave Kutani-style painting behind, but the passion never fully disappeared. It would return occasionally. In 2019, I revisited it for the manga exhibition at the British Museum. I created a three-dimensional manga series titled Food Heaven Seven Sisters Road, which follows the adventure of animated lump of porcelain clay, which actually taught myself, exploring various British food. So here is baked beans on toast on the right side, and there is a fish and chips, and it's a kebab, and hummus, black pudding, and it's a story about this porcelain monster exploring wonderful food on the Seven Sisters Road, but then somehow transformed himself to eat this food he ate. And then again, food was source of my inspiration. These pieces were later added to the British Museum collection. The public comments on social media were mixed. Some said the works often looked unappetizing, nasty, moldy. I lost my appetite definitely for dinner. But to me, grotesque and beauty often live side by side. The tension is something I embrace when I'm working with ceramics. This is another piece I created in England, painted in the Kutani style. It tells the story of the legendary Yoro waterfall in Gifu Prefecture. The tale is about a devoted son who finds a magical water in a waterfall that tastes like sake and offers it to his unwell old father. After drinking it, the father miraculously recovers. I illustrated scenes from the story along with the keywords in a manga style over the surface of the work. To express the supernatural power of the waterfall and the surprise felt by the father and son, I gilded the inside with brilliant gold. It's a piece that blends a legend story and the manga in the uniquely Kutani way. So there are big change after arriving in the UK. After settling in the UK, my style of works changed. I began working more often in nature, I became more daytime person. I frequently discover interested in plants while rambling, touching them to understand their textures, closely examining their structures. I enjoy studying the microscopic detail of the plants, interpreting the essence of what makes leaves and flowers beautiful. My intention has become to translate the infinite beauty of nature into delicate porcelain sculptures. This is a commission piece I have made, and one moment that deeply inspired me was for this work when I looked up at the massive hawthorn tree in England. Standing beneath it, I saw the small, delicate flowers cascading like a waterfall. From a distance, they resembled soft piles of snow. I was fascinated by the coexistence of such delicate flowers with the grand scale of tree. I was moved by this beauty and longed to express it through porcelain. So this is the detail. From my time at the Royal College of Art in 2008, I became particularly fascinated by a method called spraying, a traditional technique often seen in Westwood jasper ware. While spending time in museums, I was drawn to the incredible attention to the detail in these works. I also developed a deep appreciation for classical European botanical decorations, which I found in architecture, interiors, furniture. I became captivated by the way twigs coil around the pillars, how leaves curl as they meet the ceilings, and how table legs are adorned with acanthus leaves. These designs have a sense of flow and movement, making them appear almost three-dimensional. This inspiration gave a profound impact on my new porcelain work. I created this piece for my solo show at the National Trust Lanhydrock House in Cornwall in 2023. On the way from the nearby station to the estate house, I saw gorgeous rhododendrons blooming along the stream. Through porcelain, although the porcelain's white, I expressed the vibrant red color of the rhododendron through the form and shape of its petals. This is the title Komorebi Ball. And porcelain is a wonderful material. It allows me to push creative boundaries. This piece is titled Komorebi, which means sunlight filtering through trees in Japanese. What moves us in nature isn't just the leaves or flowers with what we see, but the things that happen to or between them. With this work, I aim to capture the shimmering light that passes through trees and leaves in porcelain form. I will now talk process of my current work. I design leaves or flower sprigs by studying organic botanical forms. Once I complete the original sprig model and plaster molds, I press mold hundreds of leaf sprigs in porcelain and carefully carve the finer details of each sprig. Then I apply the porcelain leaves in dense layer on the form which I throw on the potter's wheel. The leaves are applied so densely that they are often completely obscure the underlying shape, just as the abundance of green leaves hides the branch of the tree. The idea behind it is to express the overwhelming power of nature, like ivy covering a house or overgrown hedges hiding buildings. I tend to create works where every surface is completely covered in decoration. There is a persistent urge not to leave any space untouched. I am compelled to keep going, to add more and more detail. I feel the endless journey to refine elaborating of the detail never end, as if the process could go on forever. It's like having a deep conversation with someone I like. I don't want the conversation to end. I stay engaged, continue to interact with the piece, forming a bond. After this intense process, I feel a part of me even transferred into the work. When one of my pieces, the large feather leaves bowl, was settled at the British Museum next to Haniwa and Jomon pottery, I felt something truly special. My work was breathing the same air as the Japanese ceramics, which made thousands of years ago. The shape of my piece even resembled to the ancient form, like a Jomon flame pot. As a result of trying to express the power of nature that lies from the earth, my piece became like this whole form. Getting over the 1,000 years, I felt like my piece and myself had some kind of communication with the maker of the Jomon flame pot. Then I start thinking of future. I will pass one day, however, my work continued to carry my thoughts. I would like to make work which resonates with people in the future, even after I have long gone. Hopefully, in faraway future, when someone looked at my piece, they can see source of the nature, and there are still flowers beautifully blooming and people enjoying walk in the forest. We can walk in forest. Porcelain has an extremely long life and carrying deep history of human cultures. Working with such a material is a great pleasure. It expands my imagination. When I create with porcelain, it feels like my hands are in direct contact with the deep history. This is a video that shows the inspiration and also process about the gilding. My porcelain work is inspired by nature. When I handle the porcelain clay itself, my old memories of nature in Japan come flooding back through my hands. Abstract and uncertain when it was in my mind. Kneading, brushing, patting, carving, there are many processes before the shape emerges from the porcelain clay and begins to take form of my tactile memory. I often gild the inside of my porcelain works with gold leaf. My first encounter with gold was the Buddhist altar in my family home. Inside, it is full of golden objects, the world of heavens, which is completely covered by gold. Every evening before dinner, my grandmother and I would sit in front of the altar to pray for our ancestors. When I gild my work, I feel as if it becomes an entrance to heaven. The time ran out, so thank you so much.
I wondered, that's a fascinating talk, Hitomi, whether you feel part of a movement in Britain. I'm thinking of Rachel Kneebone and Lucille Lewin, who also work in porcelain, who build up in an additive way.
Yes, there are. I'm aware that there are a lot of artists now using porcelain to make work, and I think as a material, it's this tactile quality offers endless possibility for to express beauty of nature and much more. Porcelain has a long connection, long connected to East and West, facilitating culture exchange and transforming into countless beautiful objects through a variety of styles and techniques in the long history. And I think that when we use a porcelain, it's like touching the history. So it feels like we were kind of directly connected, kind of continuing the stories more. So I think that's why probably, like me as an artist, love porcelain. It's not about something we see, but something, the history, I think.
I feel that in the UK, perhaps your work is seen as quintessentially Japanese, perhaps because of a rather essentialist view of Japan as a place of very high skill and exquisiteness and attention to detail. But to me, your work seems to have its roots more in 18th century European porcelain, although I know you also have been inspired by early Japanese ceramics, these flamewares. But where do you sort of feel you belong? Because all of you have made these extraordinary journeys in different ways.
Yes, and I thought about after I got questions, and I've been living here almost 18 years in Britain, and I think that the influence from this British culture, but so formed my life, basically, myself. So naturally it's come out through my work. But when I look back, when I was still in Japan, in the teenage time, actually I loved to draw the shoujo manga. I mean, I'm so much into shoujo manga when I was teens. And these shoujo manga actually influenced by European like style, like Art Nouveau or these. And I remember I went to the Alphonse Mucha exhibition when I was 11 or something with my mother, and it really left me profound impact. And it's made my artistic vision, I think, almost, for the future. So when I came to Britain, it's like I came back to home, almost.
Right.
So when I now see all this work I made here, somehow I can say it's not like almost from a shoujo manga or even. So I think it's natural that you see my work. It's very European because I already had that influence from my time in Japan.
Yes, I wondered whether you lived in Walthamstow and there was some William Morris influence of the pastoral that had overtaken your work. But given that we're sort of running out of time, I just wanted to ask the question of you and Yoca, where you both take decoration to real extremes, in a sense, in a way making it a rather radical, unsettling activity, very much the opposite of the minge that Glenn was talking about this morning. In that sense, minge, in my mind, is very connected to the purities of modernism, and you've gone beyond, perhaps you've all gone beyond that into some postmodern era, which seems in a way to have more to do with the extraordinary work that came out of Japan in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and it was shown at world fairs. Although I feel your work has far more spirituality than that kind of ceramic and metal work, but it's incredibly elaborate and highly decorated. But whether you all feel that you've sort of gone beyond, that minge actually doesn't feature really as an inspirational...
I must say that more, and I think my work is a lot of work in it. And so I continue engage with the piece. They're almost like it's imprinting myself on the piece. So more, it's really part of me go into the piece. So this active engagement actually more give me also the peace, almost meditation. And that's something different from the work we mentioned, like 18th century, these pieces.
And Yoca, you too.
To me, I love minge work, but it's totally different from my work, obviously. And I don't think I was so influenced by UK education, like goldsmith education, and I wasn't allowed to unthinking or being in purity, like believing in purity, like just thinking anything like Zen. So maybe really not really quite far from minge, but from Glenn's presentation. It was very interesting because like that kind of anonymously. What was the word like anonymity? Yeah,
Oh,
so
anonymity.
anonymity can be like really can be taken in like many can be taken like really. Sorry, I can't.
Can be sort of
in like
take many
different ways.
forms,
So
yeah.
take any forms like futuristic idea or so. While I was thinking, while I was listening to the presentation, I was thinking about anonymity. Anonymity, is that right? Okay. Anonymity. So, like my work is can be anonymous in the future, like so easily. Even the digital tattoo or like AI, the information in network may not exist. So what makes things to be anonymous really? Because there's somebody made it. So like I was kind of thinking about it and about the decorations. And like you mentioned before, to me the decoration, my painting, I don't really think that my painting as decoration. It's a surface maybe, but to me decoration has different meaning. Just like kind of how to say something around the main themes. So because the patterns also has lots of meaning in it. So
So how do you two feel about this idea of reacting against Mingei to an extent, or Mingei being irrelevant, and Suzanne?
In Japanese tea ceremony, plain black is the highest status vessel. So that would relate to this non-imposition of your character or expression, that it's the harmony of all the tools together, the balance, the withdrawal of yourself. In a tea ceremony dish, we would finish an object by 80% and leave 20% for the user to actually, so the person who's using it is always in the forefront of your mind, that they complete the picture. And with sumie painting too, it's the person who's looking at the picture will complete the picture.
Lovely. I feel you mentioned tea ceremony to me,
Yes.
which is fascinating.
Actually, since I moved to Kanazawa, I started taking class of the green tea ceremony. Since I talk about I'm kind of left out from the KOGEI culture in Japan and also the contemporary art, so I'm between. But the tea ceremony is pretty much conceptual art and performance, and also contemporary art and the tablewares and also crafts. So everything is in it. That's very important to me because the tea ceremony is embedded a long time ago, but they accepted everything. They integrate everything together, which is they are not categorize anything, but they kind of enjoy what is the beauty and what is the aesthetic by themselves. And I think that's very, I don't know how to say, very healthy mind, not to categorize everything, but seeing the artwork, seeing expression. So that's also related to the Mingei, because Mingei is pretty much sometimes an experimental work, and they kind of try to warp the tea bowl, and they kind of find aesthetics. But once we kind of focus on technique, it's everything's perfect and high-skilled. But for me, it's experimental work, in Mingei, is really important to me, and also integrate everything. And green tea ceremony culture is very interesting to me, and then that's kind of engage myself how I can kind of use material in my work.
Hitomi a clap because I moved on. I think we've got time for questions from the audience, so please, we've got 10 minutes. I feel I've talked too much myself.
Just filling up the quietness. In your beautiful presentation of your glass works, one of the subtitles said something like homage to Joseph Knapp, and I wondered, there is a kind of tradition of not only women botanists and botanical drawing, but also I was thinking of the museum in Kassel, and I don't know if the man's name's the same, and also the great American glass botanist. And so there was that subtitle, homage, was it not homage to Joseph Knapp or something in one of your subtitles? And I wondered how you situate yourself in any longer tradition of working with pressed flowers, the discovery of botany, the transcultural elements of botany and everything else, and make it so remarkably new and beautiful.
Thank you for your question. Actually, I went to Danby Castle, like in UK, up to the Scotland. There is some castle with a beautiful garden, has plants between the window, and actually leave it for a long time, and then all like plants was like color is away, so it looks like whitish, and I was really surprised. Oh, my work is there. It looks like it's kind of like a one of the cabinet of curiosity, kind of like storage in the Danby Castle. Yeah, it's kind of storage. It's not like a main castle, and I just like went there, and it was amazing. Like, oh, okay, like a long time ago, like people thinking about that is decoration, or like it's kind of thinking about like a preserve the nature, or like memories or something, because back that time like a photograph is very like expensive, or like they can take a photo, so like they kind of want to leave their kind of residues or memories in the window or something. So like I am not sure like specifically about the botanists or like glass botanists you're talking about, but also I was really fascinated when I saw the work in the castles. Yeah.
Hello. As a craft practitioner, often the first thing people ask me is, how long did that take you to make? And I think a lot of people see time as like an intrinsic value of a piece, and you work with quite time-consuming processes. I was just wondering how that affects your work and how people approach you when they talk to you about that and how you feel about it. I find it very frustrating, but I was just intrigued about your perspectives on that, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Well, my work sometimes take more than 1 year because the big piece, like a piece in the British Museum, it took 1 year because the carving takes each 1,000 of leaves. Each leaf is carved by tiny the tools and applied, and the drying time extremely long, like half a year. So this, because I'm doing it more than 10 years, somehow it's become normal in my studio. So when I'm waiting to dry, I start another piece. So it's like there are several pieces in a different stage. Yes. So, and I think like in the beginning it was frustrating because I cannot meet the deadline. But then nowadays, it's kind of really time slow down in my mind. So almost like one child growing up slowly. It's really like I thinking of them as a human. So then I'm not frustrated anymore.
For my works, I will take 3 months to half a year for one piece, but make several works together, like and divide it in process. So it's not really long time. Maybe for making one tea ball, maybe just taking 2 weeks to complete. In short, yeah. So, but painting's process is very it's like joy. I enjoy a lot, and if I had stiff work, if I had stiff work, I do hand building and clay works, so it's healthy.
Lacquerware traditionally takes at least a year to make. So the same, we have several pieces going at the same time, but exhibition deadlines were a huge problem for me. So it actually forced me to invent new techniques, like doing the final decoration on undercoats and things. So it was actually, it forced me to reinvent some things, but it's nothing that you can do in a hurry. So again, the lifestyle, the process being kind of the art, a kind of meditative self-discipline, self-control, and then getting lost in that, I guess you'd call it flow, until you get a backache. And then suddenly you realize you've been at it for 12 hours. And I think it's a rhythm that you get to having several pieces ongoing at different stages. While one is curing, you start something else, or you prepare tools or things like that.
For me, summer work is like blowing glass is very instant. So getting the technique is taking more than 10 years or something, but sometimes just 1 hour and done. And then some work is installation work takes 10 years, as I showed. So it's depending on 1 hour to 10 years, I can say.
Hello, I have a question for the ceramic artists. You were both trained in traditional kutani ware making. Did you ever envision to work as traditional makers for making traditional kutani ware? And why did you decide to go a bit away from that? Is it, as we're talking about gender and tradition, is it because you would have probably had to work in under a master and you could not sign your own pieces? Is it something like this, or is it just because you wanted to be artists a bit more than craft makers?
Well, I born in Gifu and moved to Kanazawa and went into Kanazawa College of Art. And I think that there already I have a vision that I want to make my own work with my style, my inspiration. So I wasn't thinking to go into the traditional ceramics. That's also, but also the atmosphere in art college is more like the don't follow predecessor, make something new. That's the kind of teacher, and also my other classmate also the envision. So I never thought to go into traditional, for example, painter and kutani. I think that it's not like dismissing them. It was so inspirational, like a fine red painting, the Fukushima Busan, I remember, visitor. I totally admired, and I dreamed of could have such a skill to do this. But I didn't go with it because I have this bigger visions, what I want to make, what I want to express.
well, first of all, there is not such things like you don't get mark or if you're a female craftsman in a traditional kutani. But of course, Japanese traditional craft world is consisted on patriarchy system, and is still there because it's the most reasonable way to conserve traditional technique, because that influence master and apprentice system as well. But I have to say, declining childbirth in Japan is very serious. So you can't really. Sometimes like very popular kutani ware kiln can help some to succeed. So in that case, daughter could succeed. I think the case is happening. But in my case, because I grew up in Tokyo and completely has no relation, grew up in the family who has no no connection with traditional craft at all. So to me, I was an outsider. I'm always outsider and a bit of outcast. So, but people in Kutani ware, like artists, like many artists, are quite open. Like maybe because I'm outcast, outsider. But I think they knew that I really admire Kutani wares and histories and the current artists in traditional craft societies. But the aesthetic is so different because aesthetic of them is like, how do you say, like the perfection is aesthetic for the traditional craft society. But my idea is not going to perfection. My intention is like placing my works to be somewhere in waver, always like in glazon. That's so I didn't really, never really considering about being in traditional kind of craft. Even I'm making kind of imitation of craft, traditional craft. Do you understand? Okay.
Well, we've traveled amazingly through time and space, and it's been incredibly inspiring to talk to Rui, Suzanne, Yoca, and Hitomi. It's been marvelous. So perhaps a big clap for these wonderful artists.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and the four panelists. It was really wonderful panel. So we'll have about 15 minutes break. And so we'll, just a little bit less than 10, 15 minutes, sorry. So please come back.